Expired. We'll move to question time, and I call Senator Nampijinka-Price.
Thank you, Madam President. My question today is to the Minister representing the Minister for Indigenous Australians, Senator Gallagher. Minister, more than $4 billion goes to the National Indigenous Australians Agency. Can you give us a real, practical example of a policy that your government has initiated through the NIAA that is improving the lives of our most marginalised Indigenous Australians?
Thank you, Senator Nampijinka-Price. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Nampijinka-Price for the question, and I just want to acknowledge the coverage I saw in the paper this morning about the vandalism attacks on your family, and just acknowledge that that's completely unacceptable, and just wanted to register that. It's not nice to, it's not Australian to see things like that happening. In relation to the question you ask, the NIAA, as Senator Nampijinka-Price knows, runs a range of programs, including through the Indigenous Advancement Strategy. There are a range of programs across health, education, community services, family support services that that program runs. In addition to that, there are a range of programs that we're currently consulting with First Nations communities around some of the packages that we announced earlier through the October budget and the budget that we've just had, around making sure that we are putting in place new programs that have support of the local community. But I am happy to provide a list of those programs to Senator Nampijinka-Price. I accept there are significant amounts of public dollars going into this part of government service delivery, and it's always important to know and expect that we are getting good value for those public funds that are going, which is why I think some of the outcomes of the audit into that program by ANAO are important to implement.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Nampijinka-Price, first supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. Minister, the Australian National Audit Office said that the Northern Land Council is not fully implementing its fraud and corruption policy, and the Central Land Council's fraud control arrangements fall short of the minimum requirements. How can the government reassure the Australian taxpayer that their hard-earned dollars are not being wasted or misused, rather than improving the lives of our most marginalised Indigenous Australians?
Thank you, Senator Nampijinka-Price. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you for the question. I think one thing is very clear from the discussion and debates that we've been having in the lead-up to the referendum, is that Australians want to ensure there is a better future and drive better outcomes across First Nations communities, and that is a key priority for this government. I would say the Audit Office report, which the NIAA has accepted all 7 recommendations from it, covered a period of time, I think, from 2020 to 2021, and the recommendations were fully accepted by NIAA about ensuring that there was a focus on compliance and fraud prevention, and I have no doubt that they are doing that, and I would expect that they would be ready and available to discuss these estimates when they appear next week. But it is important, and that's why we have audits, and that's why we have the Audit Office that's doing that work and highlighting those deficiencies where they exist.
Thank you, Senator Gallagher. Senator Nampijinka-Price, second supplementary.
Thank you. On October 4, you wrote in the Financial Review that the current approach simply is not delivering value for money. Given you refuse to commit to an audit of spending on Indigenous programs to ensure that taxpayer money is being spent appropriately and getting to communities that need it most, can you guarantee that every taxpayer dollar is being used as efficiently as possible?
Thank you, Senator Nampijinga-Price. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. And I thank Senator Nampijinga-Price for the question. And the point I was making in that opinion piece was that whilst we were making appropriate investments, as each government has, governments of all political persuasions have, the outcomes that we aren't seeing the improvement in outcomes, and that's the point I was making. And we had been arguing that the voice was a mechanism to change that the status quo wasn't working, and that by listening and working and taking advice from First Nations people through a voice, that we would be able to improve on those outcomes through the process that the voice would allow. Now, as the referendum's been held, we respect the outcome of that referendum. We will continue to listen and to work on, and we'll use the Central Australian Strategy, the work that Minister Burney is doing through that, as a model of how to ensure that we are getting better outcomes for the money that's being invested in First Nations communities.
Thank you, Minister. Senator White.
And my question is to the Minister for Finance and the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. Last month, the Albanese Labor government delivered on its commitment to release the Employment White Paper Working Future, outlining a roadmap to ensure more Australians who want jobs or more hours of work can get them. What key challenges did the paper identify, and what opportunities are ahead for individual Australians and the broader economy?
Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator White for the question and for highlighting the importance of the Employment White Paper, which the government released in late September. The Employment White Paper outlines our vision for a strong and inclusive labour market, one where everyone has the opportunity for secure, fairly paid work, and people, businesses and communities can be the beneficiaries of that. The White Paper is about 5 things: delivering sustained and inclusive full employment, promoting job security and strong, sustainable wage growth, reigniting productivity growth, filling skills needs and building our future workforce, and overcoming barriers to employment and broadening that opportunity. The White Paper provides the roadmap to make sure that our labour market is in the best shape possible for the future. We do face some challenges in the economy, including an ageing population, rising demand for care and support services, the technological and digital transformation that's occurring, the climate change and the net zero transformation that's occurring across our economy, and geopolitical risk and fragmentation. We have a plan to harness the opportunities for Australian workers, and these include areas that I've just outlined above, like jobs in the net zero economy, jobs in the care economy, reducing barriers to work for people from more diverse backgrounds, greater participation for women in the economy, expanding our skills base, reforming the migration system and broadening access to foundational skills. These are all really important areas for us to focus on as we work together to ensure that everybody who wants a job across the economy can get that job, and more importantly that they're given the skills and opportunities in the lead up to that to be prepared for the jobs of the future.
Senator White, first supplementary.
Minister, National Cabinet met yesterday and endorsed the new National Skills Agreement, which reflects much of the thinking in the Employment White Paper. How will the agreement expand and transform access to the vet sector, support quality training and implement reforms to address critical skills shortages? And how will the government's fee-free TAFE measure help industry while also helping Australians with the cost of living?
Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator White for the supplementary. That's right. Last night, the Prime Minister and Skills Minister announced the landmark National Skills Agreement. This is evidence of a government and a Prime Minister that wants to work with others to get results instead of the wrecking and negativity that we've seen from those opposite. The Skills Agreement will support a new way of the states and territories and the Commonwealth working together. The new agreement will see the Australian government invest in up to an additional $3.7 billion in VET over 5 years, bringing total Commonwealth investment through the agreement to $12.6 billion. First Ministers noted that the National Skills Agreement delivers on the vision and principles previously endorsed by National Cabinet. First Ministers also recommitted to fee-free TAFE. This has been an incredibly popular government initiative, with almost 215,000 places delivered in the first 6 months of this year, far exceeding expectations. Remember TAFE?
Thank you, Minister. The time has expired. Senator White, second supplementary.
The Employment White Paper outlines where some of the big changes in our economy will be in future decades and helps to guide how we can be prepared to harness the opportunities that come with them. This includes opportunities for women in the Australian economy. What are the opportunities for Australian women and how will they help grow and strengthen our national economy?
Thank you, Senator White. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, and thank you, Senator White. One of the most fundamental changes in the Australian labour market over the past 50 years is the rise in female workplace participation, and we want to continue this trend. About 62.5% of women participated in the labour market in August 2023, compared to 37% in 1966. But we do have a highly gender-segregated labour market, and gender segregation is a major barrier to addressing skill shortages in critical occupations such as aged care, early childhood education and care, teaching and technicians and trade workers. Now, we know that women dominate in sectors that pay less and are less secure, and male-dominated sectors have less flexibility or access to paid parental leave. So these are both areas that we need to concentrate on to make sure that we can maximise the use of our labour market to deliver in those areas of skill shortage, but also make sure that we're using fully the skills across the economy.
Senator Liddle.
Thank you. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. Minister, you and your colleagues continue to justify Mr Albanese's disastrous and divisive referendum by saying it was about honouring a promise. Since the latest CPI figures show food and non-alcoholic beverages have increased 7.5% year-on-year, instead of dividing Australia with his disastrous referendum, could the Prime Minister also keep his promise that a Labor government will lower the cost of living?
Thank you, Senator Liddle. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, and I thank Senator Liddle for the question. It relates to cost of living, which is an incredibly important issue for the government and one that we have remained focused on since we came into government. And if I just block out some of those interjections, I will get to it. As I said yesterday, we have provided a very significant cost of living package through the October budget and through the May budget to address those pressures where we can without adding to inflation. And every single step along the way, as we've been designing those programs and implementing them through legislation, those opposite have opposed them. And so it's one thing to stand up and ask questions about what you're doing in the same breath as you're opposing the steps that we're taking to reduce those pressures on families and households across Australia. It's hypocritical, I would argue, to on the one hand rail against it and in the same breath use your vote, every single one of your vote, and sit on the other side to block legislation that would introduce measures that support households with those cost of living pressures. We are totally focused on cost of living. Since day one of this government, we'll have a look, go back and have a look at the October budget, have a look at the energy bill relief, have a look at the cheaper childcare, have a look at the fee-free TAFE, have a look at cheaper medicines, and where were you then? Absolutely nowhere.
Order on my left. Did you have anything further to add, Minister? No?
No.
Order. Order on my left. Minister.
So I know it hurts when people call you out for the double standards and for your hypocrisy, but that is what we are seeing here. To call it out, to pretend you're concerned, but then to actually block and stand in the way of those measures being introduced. That's exactly what you did. Where were you on cheaper medicines? Where were you?
Thank you, Minister. Senator Liddle, first supplementary. Senator Wong and Senator Henderson. I have a senator on her feet waiting to ask a question. Senator Liddle.
Thank you. Minister, instead of a divisive and expensive referendum to keep his word, when will the Prime Minister keep his word and deliver a $275 cut to power bills as promised 97 times, instead of the 20% increase announced by the Australian Energy Regulator in May 2023?
Thank you, Senator Little. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Well, for the first time in a long time, we do have a Prime Minister that keeps his word. We do have a Prime Minister that keeps his word, that actually does, that sticks by his convictions, by the commitments that he gives. And we know that's a strange concept to those opposite, that fly by the wind of a 24/7 media cycle and change their positions as much as they probably change their underwear, I would imagine. Well, and so I accept that it is a foreign concept to you. But on energy bill relief, on implementing the Powering Australia plan, we are doing exactly what we said we did when we promised before the election. And where were those opposite? Where were those opposite when we sought to pass legislation that allowed billions of dollars to flow on people's energy bills? Where were you then? On their winter bills, where were you? You opposed it. You opposed it. We don't forget that, and we'll be making sure everybody else knows about it.
Senator Little. Order. Senator Little, second supplementary.
Thank you. Minister, we've just had the expensive and divisive referendum so the Prime Minister could keep his word. When will the Prime Minister keep his promise to get real wages moving? Considering
Order. Senator Little, please resume your seat. Order across the chamber. Order. Senator McKenzie. Order. And Senator Green. Senator Little, please continue.
Where would you like me to continue from the beginning?
You got to real wages and then the noise started.
Okay. So when will the Prime Minister keep his promise to get real wages moving, considering under his watch real wages have fallen by more than 2.3%? Murray!
Order. Order. Senator Watt and Senator Birmingham. Order. Order. Neither of you have the call. I'm about to give the call to the Minister. I would like there to be silence in the chamber. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, and I thank Senator Little for the question. I feel that whoever wrote that didn't really have your best interests at heart, Senator Little, when they put that together. When you had spent a decade keeping wages down, that is what you did, to ensure that working people never ever got ahead.
Order. 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 Minister, please continue.
Yeah. When you had a whole section in your minimum wage case submission that had the headline, "The Importance of Low Wages." I mean, that is your record. Wages stagnating, never ever supported a minimum wage increase. What did you do on aged care? What did you do? Sorry, Senator Hughes, I can't hear you because you did nothing. You did nothing.
Minister, please resume your seat. Senator Hughes, I have called Senator Hughes. Senator Hughes, third time. I've called you twice. I called the chamber to order, and you were yelling across the chamber. Don't answer back. I'm calling for order, and it is disrespectful to continue to call out after I have called for order. Minister, please continue.
Thank you. Wages are growing for the first time in a decade because you have a government that supports working people getting wage increases, that support minimum wage increases, that support aged care workers getting an increase, and that is why we are seeing those wages move for the first time in a decade.
Senator Rice.
Mr President, my question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations, Minister Watt. This week is Anti-Poverty Week, a week to raise awareness and take action to eradicate poverty. Right now, there are millions of people on income support living below the poverty line who are forced to complete mutual obligations or risk losing their income. Recently, The Guardian reported that a taxpayer-funded course run by Wise Employment, one of Australia's biggest employment service providers, gives job seekers instructions on how to shower properly and asks them in a questionnaire if the reason they are unemployed is because they are overweight or lazy. Minister, do you think it's acceptable that people surviving on less than $54 a day are forced to fulfil these degrading and pointless activities or risk their payments being suspended?
Thank you, Senator Rice. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Rice. I'm obviously not aware of the details of that particular example that you've cited, but as you are aware, Minister Burke has expressed concern about the program which you're referring to that provides funding through those sorts of agencies. And as I know you're aware, there is an inquiry underway into that agency. Not being the minister directly, I think it's Workforce Australia, the work that agency does. But of course we believe that everyone in Australia should be treated with respect, whether they be someone in work or someone seeking work. And I would be concerned about anything that a particular agency may be doing that doesn't treat people with that level of respect. More broadly, the issue of poverty is again something that the Albanese government is not just concerned about but is taking action to seek to address. We provided in the most recent budget an increase in rent assistance, Commonwealth rent assistance, which I think was the first time in an extremely long time that any Australian government had provided increased rent assistance. Senator Gallagher has talked about the action that this government has taken to lift wages, which of course doesn't directly apply to those out of work, but certainly for low-income Australians, those increases in wages have provided some relief. And of course, in addition, we've provided additional relief for energy prices. We've provided a massive investment in social housing, which of course is predominantly used by those on low incomes. So there's a range of ways in which the Albanese government is taking action to assist those most disadvantaged within our community. And I look forward, and I'm sure Minister Burke looks forward to seeing the recommendations of the inquiry about how we can make changes to Workforce Australia so that it does fulfil the objectives that it was originally designed for.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Rice, first supplementary.
Thanks, Minister. Wise Employment is among dozens of privatised job agencies contracted by the federal government to run the $500 million employability skills training to allegedly help job seekers become job-ready by providing intensive pre-employment training. Minister, how can the government justify spending $500 million of taxpayers' dollars on these useless and discriminatory courses and yet refuse to raise the rate of job seeker to above the poverty line?
Thank you, Senator Rice. Minister Watt.
Well, to start with, Senator Rice, I would again point out that in its most recent budget, the Albanese government did increase payments, working age payments, for things like JobSeeker, AusStudy and Youth Allowance by $40 per fortnight. So that was something that was necessary, especially to assist people who are out of work and students with cost of living challenges. And as I've said, that in addition we provided increased rent assistance and all of the other things that I was talking about. As you know, Senator Rice, some of the challenges that we face in terms of Workforce Australia and the programs and agencies that are funded through it is that the former government entered into billions of dollars of contracts with these private sector agencies on the eve of the last election, and that is something that can't be undone overnight. But we are undertaking that inquiry, led by the member for Bruce, Julian Hill, and we look forward to recommendations being received so that we can take action.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Rice, second supplementary.
Thanks, President. Over the past year, we've heard evidence from unemployed advocates, income support recipients and employment providers that mutual obligations are punitive and counterproductive. In fact, Wise Employment itself said in its submission to the Workforce Australia inquiry that removing these measures from the system would improve engagement from job seekers. Minister, I know you said it can't be done overnight, but given this mounting evidence that mutual obligations hinder rather than help people on income support, what is the rationale for maintaining this harmful system? Minister Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you to Senator Rice. I recall discussing or debating this issue with you at a previous Senate estimates hearing, and the Albanese government does support the concept of mutual obligation. However, we do not support it being undertaken in the punitive manner that the system has built into it after 10 years of coalition government. We do think that it is right that those in receipt of public support, public benefits, that there is some obligation on them to seek employment and to undertake the issues that are needed to seek employment. But we don't think that it should be punitive in the way that the system is currently structured, and that's exactly one of the issues that's being considered by that inquiry, being led by the member for Bruce, Julian Hill. We probably disagree on that matter, but the fundamental point is that we don't think that Australians should be treated in a punitive way. They shouldn't be treated in a degrading way, whether they be in work or out of work.
Thank you, Minister Watt. Senator Sheldon.
Thank you. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Skills and Training, Senator Watt. After the May 2022 election, not only was it clear that the Albanese government inherited $1 trillion of Liberal and national debt, but were bequeathed a massive skills deficit holding our economy back. How is the Albanese government continuing to prioritise skills and training for Australians, and how will today's landmark 5-year national skills agreement embed national cooperation and strategic investment in our vocational education and training sector? What can we teach those opposite?
Senator Hughes. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you very much, Senator Sheldon, for the question. And you're absolutely right, Senator Sheldon. The $1 trillion of debt was not the only thing we inherited from the Liberal and National Party. We were also bequeathed a massive skills deficit. And you can really see very clearly where the coalition feels a bit sensitive, a bit vulnerable, because they always pipe up. They wake from their slumber when they're reminded of the $1 trillion in debt that we inherited, that they left behind. They always wake up from their slumber when we point out that they kept wages deliberately low for a decade that they were in power. They're all the things that they're embarrassed about, and we are never going to let the Australian public forget about it. And we're also not going to let the Australian public forget that we were also bequeathed a massive skills deficit by the former coalition government. According to the OECD, and I suspect the former Senate leader Matthias Cormann knows about this now that he's the Secretary-General of the OECD, as of July 2022, Australia was experiencing the second most severe labour shortage in the developed world. Matthias must have just been shaking his head when his own organisation had to put out that report saying that Australia had the second most severe labour shortage in the developed world. And that's why the Albanese government took urgent action on being elected, starting by bringing together Australians, unions, employers and civil society at the Jobs and Skills Summit, establishing Jobs and Skills Australia to underpin our response to current and emerging workforce needs, funding 180,000 fee-free TAFE places in 2023. Can't hear you, Senator Birmingham. You've got something to say there? I didn't hear about that. And of course, we've already passed 214,000 enrolments, and we've created new energy apprenticeships to get more workers into the clean energy sector. Today, we've taken the next step, with the Albanese government announcing an historic agreement with every state and territory to boost investment in the Australian vet sector over the next 5 years. We're prepared to invest $12.6 billion, including an additional $3.7 billion, to expand and transform access to the vet sector and give Australia the skills it needs.
Time for answering has expired. Senator Sheldon, first supplementary.
Now, we know access to education and training for students and workers to reskill or upskill in areas of demand can be life-changing. It also increases the likelihood of a good, secure job with career progression. How does today's announcement complement the cost-of-living relief measures already being implemented by the government?
Thank you, Senator Sheldon. And Minister Watt, I do remind you to make your comments to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, President. Again, thank you, Senator Sheldon, for the question. The 5-year National Skills Agreement announced today by the Prime Minister and Mr O'Connor, the Minister for Skills and Training, furthers our goal of putting TAFE at the heart of the vet sector. We're moving away from the decade of coalition rule where they stripped funding away from TAFEs. We're putting TAFE back at the heart of the vet system in this country. And from 2024, the Albanese government will deliver a further 300,000 fee-free TAFE places nationally. In 2023, already over 214,000 Australians have enrolled in fee-free TAFE, smashing our target of 180,000 places 6 months earlier than anticipated and nearly 35,000 places more than expected. And importantly, these enrolments are in areas of high priority in terms of skills needs. Our fee-free TAFE policy is giving opportunities for Australians to get good, secure jobs and removing cost barriers to skills and training.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Sheldon, second supplementary.
Minister, the TAFE sector has endured periods of underfunding, impacts of deregulation, loose rules of vet market entry, a lack of national cohesion, and an obsession for competition at the expense of collaboration. What lessons have we learned from the past, and what has been the response to our skills policies, including those providing important cost of living relief?
Thank you, Senator Sheldon. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Senator Sheldon. Well, I guess the main lesson we've learnt from the past is that if you want a well-funded training system in this country that meets the country's skill needs, you cannot have a coalition government, because we saw the legacy of that 10 years of underfunding and decay in the form of massive skill shortages and holding Australians back. The National Skills Agreement, signed now, means that the Albanese government and states and territories can work together in a coordinated way. What a novel concept, cooperation and working together with states and territories. Because, as we saw under the coalition, if you don't collaborate and coordinate with states and territories, who are responsible for huge amounts of investment in their own TAFE sectors, then it's impossible to get the best outcomes for Australians, businesses and the economy. And poor old Matthias Cormann has to put out a report saying that Australia was experiencing the second most severe labour shortage in the developed world. It's the first time in 10 years that every state and territory has been supported by the Commonwealth in a genuine and collaborative way. We're getting on with delivering funding to deliver the skills Australians need.
The time for answering has expired. Senator David Pocock.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Sport, Minister Gallagher. Will the government immediately rule out relocating the Australian Institute of Sport away from the ACT after more than 4 decades in Canberra?
Minister.
Thank you, and I thank Senator Pocock for the question and for his interest in the AIS. And I think, as Senator Pocock knows, we have a review underway that was announced on the weekend to look at the AIS and whether it's fit for purpose and to understand the best approach to high performance as we move towards the Brisbane 2032 Games. As Senator Pocock understands, one of the issues in the terms of reference that will be being looked at is the location of the AIS. That is one of the issues the review is looking at. The review is due to report to government by the end of this year, so it is a relatively quick review. But because there is a review underway, I'm not in a position to rule in or rule out anything, the government's position prior to that review reporting. But the focus of the government is to ensure that we have the best facilities and that we have the best arrangements in place to deliver what athletes need in the lead-up to those important games. This is work that has to be done. I think anyone who's been out to the AIS acknowledges that it has been neglected in terms of infrastructure and support out there. It is another area that we have inherited and that we are working through about how to address it. Well, you had a decade, and from what I understand, Senator Canavan, there was repeated requests for investments in the AIS that were ignored by your government when you were in government. And that is the reality of it, so interject all you like. But anyone who has bothered to go out there and have a look might realise that it hasn't received the investments that it has needed to remain the premier facility that we need for athletes into the future.
The time for answering has expired. Senator David Pocock, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Minister. How can the government, in the midst of a cost of living crisis, justify exploring the relocation and spending $1 billion when a fraction of that will get the current facility up to world-class standard?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Well, we've got to do a range of things. Governments have to do a number of things, and one of them, I think, quite reasonably, as we're looking around the investments that we need to make into in the lead-up to the Brisbane Games in particular, what is the optimal settings for those investments. And that is exactly why we're having the review. I haven't seen a comparison of relocating versus investment in the current location. I have not seen that work being done. If it has been done, I haven't seen it, but that is precisely why we have this review, which is looking at a range of areas not only location, but it's all about how best do we support athletes and provide them with the facilities and the investments they need so that they can do what we want them to do, which is to win gold at these events and perform to their highest standard. And that's why the review is being done, to provide advice to government in a timely way.
Minister. Senator Pocock, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Minister. Why is the government spending taxpayer money on another review when we have the Australian Sports Commission, who is independent and expert, and they've already said that it's more cost-effective and less disruptive for athletes for the AS to remain in Canberra?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister Gallagher.
Well, I understand that the ASC had done a master plan of the site and had costed that for the former government, and that it had gone to the government in way of budget submission and had not been supported. So I understood that work had been done. I wasn't aware that a broader review, as is outlined in the review that we are having Ms Flaherty and Ms Smith perform, has been undertaken. So I think let's do it. Let's do it. It's a good thing to do. It's going to report within a matter of months. It will provide advice to government, and then we can work our way forward and address some of the deficiencies that those opposite have left us with, which is an AIS that has lacked the investment it's needed to put ourselves and our athletes and our national teams in the position that they need to be in for the upcoming games.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Van.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Defence Minister, Minister Wong. My question is regarding Land 400 Phase 3 Bravo. I think congratulations are deserved on choosing Hanwha's Redback Infantry Fighting Vehicle, or IFV. The Army has been calling for this capability for decades. Can the Minister outline the key reasons this IFV was chosen to protect our men and women in a fight?
Thank you, Senator Van. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President, and thanks to Senator Van. And I know he has a great interest in defence procurement, and I also know that the Land 400 project has been one of the projects of great interest to quite a number of members of Parliament and senators. But obviously, the focus that the government has had has been on capability. As you would know, Senator Van, the government announced on the 27th of July Hanwha Defence Australia is the preferred tenderer to deliver 129 infantry fighting vehicles. The Redback will be a significant upgrade to the M113, the M113, the current vehicle used by Army to protect soldiers. The Redback infantry fighting vehicle will come with latest generation armour, cannon and missiles, providing protection, providing mobility and providing firepower that is needed by our soldiers when in close combat. This is a capability that the government believes is needed for the ADF in its work. Under the government, we have also accelerated the delivery schedule of the project to provide certainty to both Army and to the Defence Industrial Base following the Defence Strategic Review. We are looking to have these vehicles delivered 2 years earlier than what they would have been under the former government's plan. I also note this was a project on which the former government did not make a procurement decision during the life of the government. So I can provide more detail or a briefing, Senator Van, about the capability of the Redback, but the advice to government was clearly it came with superior capability, particularly protection, mobility and firepower, and that was necessary, obviously, as a capability, but also was the best available provider.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Van, first supplementary.
Thank you, Minister. Given the former government lacked the ticker before the last election to announce the winner and thereby locking in the full complement of 450 that was originally tendered, given that the government has only ordered 129, which is 70% of the original 450, will the government review this cut to capability?
Thank you, Senator Van. Minister Wong.
I think there are 2 points. First is obviously, as I alluded to in my primary answer, this was a tender which was contested, or there was competition for this tender, and there was interest from both members and senators and more broadly. I understand that this happens, but obviously we took the view that whatever the different views from different tenderers, the different locations in Australia that had a particular interest in this, what was more important was the best decision on capability, and that is the way in which the government approached this decision. In relation to the numbers, I don't agree with the simple assertion that this is a cut to capability. What you will know, Senator Van, is that we have had a Defence Strategic Review. That review looks to what is the appropriate shape of the Australian Defence Force, what is the capability we need.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Van, second supplementary.
Thank you, Minister. Given that Hanwha has undertaken to still build the Redbacks in Victoria, but will likely need to build export sales to make the plant profitable, what assistance is or will the government contemplate providing Hanwha to help them grow their exports?
Thank you, Senator Van. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. If I could just, on the number, because I think it's an important point, the Defence Strategic Review looked at what is the capability that the Australian Defence Force across the board needs. It made a recommendation to reduce the number of infantry fighting vehicles to 129. And that is about transforming the Army to operate in the littoral, as in LITTORIAL environment, which is consistent with the recommendations and the direction of the Defence Strategic Review, given the circumstances Australia faces. Subject to commercial negotiations, these vehicles are intended to be built in Australia. This requires, as you allude to, establishing capability in Australia to build more. We understand the importance of exports to grow and sustain the defence industry businesses. The Defence Export Office is working closely with defence attachés and Austrades managers in key markets.
Senator Lambie.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is for the Minister representing the Minister for Defence. Just yesterday, the Chief of the Defence Force, General Angus Campbell, announced an increase in Australian Defence Force pay of 11.2% over the next 3 years. In the first year, diggers will get 4%, or 1.2% less than the current inflation. With inflation running rampant in our economy, this increase does not keep up with the cost of living. This is a pay cut to the diggers. At the same time, the CDF has announced an increase in vehicle allowance for the senior commanders. This means that the brass, once again, those senior officers that mark their own homework will receive an increase in vehicle allowance that is equal to about 10% of their annual salary. Why does the Chief of Defence Force and this government want to acknowledge the cost of living crisis for top brass but not for their diggers?
Thank you, Senator Lambie. Minister Wong.
Thank you, Senator Lambie. In relation to the point you make about a pay cut, can I be clear that the pay increase that is recommended, on the advice I have, is above the RBA's estimates for inflation over the next 3 years. So you are correct. Obviously, we know where inflation is currently. And you're correct to raise that as a concern, but just in terms of how this pay increase has been assessed, this is a pay arrangement which is, firstly, the highest pay increase in over a decade, and secondly, is above the RBA estimates for inflation over the next 3 years. Now, if those estimates are correct, then obviously that is a good thing, because that will be a real pay increase. I would note also that the advice to me is the pay offer that has been made reflects the same offer as the provided to the ADF. Pay rises for non-public office holders are determined by the Defence Force Remuneration Tribunal. The Tribunal agreed to a joint submissions from CDF and the Commonwealth for a new workplace remuneration arrangement for 23-26. The arrangement aligns with both the revised APS offer of 11.2% over 3 years and applies to both star rank and non-star rank members with effect on 9th of November 2023. In addition, the ADF personnel, many will receive allowances to recognise the unique environmental conditions in which they operate, as Senator Lambie would know, including operating in land, maritime and air domains.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Lambie, first supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. I see your government's not recognising the national security situation that we're in right now. Let's go to that, shall we? Our Defence Force is facing some of the worst morale, retention and recruitment numbers it has ever had. This Chief of Defence Force can't attract people and he sure as hell cannot hold on to them. The Defence Force Welfare Association said in its submission, and I quote, "This offer will do little, if anything, to enhance retention and recruitment and retention." Full stop. Why is this government teaming up with the CDF to be the Christmas Grinch and have diggers a pay cut before Christmas?
The time for asking the question has expired, Minister.
Well, Senator Lambie, the first point I'd make is I appreciate the. Well, first I would say I could respect your advocacy for our ADF personnel, and you have been consistent throughout your, I'm sure your whole life, but certainly in all your time in the Parliament. Second is for I disagree with your assertion as to a pay cut. I understand why you put it, but I refer to my earlier answer about this pay increase, and it is a pay increase, is calculated above excuse me, the inflation estimates that the RBA has put in place. But you are right. We have a retention issue. We have challenges in meeting the targets that were set before we came to government about the recruitment of personnel. We have worked.
Senator Lambie, second supplementary.
Way back in 2014, the then Prime Minister Abbott used the ADF as a stick to keep APS pay below inflation. He said, and I quote, "I would be very surprised if anyone in the Commonwealth public sector receives more than is received by Defence Forces," end quote. Prime Minister Abbott eventually backed down on that deal, stating, and I quote, "The Australian government understands that the work performed by the members of the Australian Defence Force is unique and crucial to our nation and our security," end quote. Which Tony Abbott does this government want to be, Carrot Tony or Stick Tony?
Thank you, Senator Lambie. Minister Wong.
Well, I don't think any Labor person wants to be anywhere near to being a Tony, Senator Lambie, as you know. And most of us do remember the 2014 budget. I was here for that budget, and we remember the extent to which that Abbott government, despite telling the Australian people the contrary, cut health, cut funding for Indigenous affairs, cut funding for broadcasting. It was a horror budget, and it was a budget which was full of betrayal. But that is perhaps I digress. We respect our ADF personnel. We support our ADF personnel. We recognise the important role they play. We honour their service, and we have put in place a pay offer which is assessed to be above inflation. We have put in place a retention bonus.
Thank
I appreciate
you,
you are critical of that because we understand.
Senator Marielle Smith.
My question is to the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Senator Wong. Following the abhorrent attacks by Hamas on Israel, can the Minister update the Senate on the Albanese government's efforts to help Australians seeking to leave Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories?
Minister Wong.
Thank you to Senator Smith for your question. Thank you for your ongoing interest alongside your colleagues in our efforts to help Australians seeking to leave Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories. Overnight, Australia airlifted some 194 people from Tel Aviv to Dubai. These included 75 Australians, their families and citizens from partner countries. As we speak, I'm very pleased that 222 Australians are on their way home from Dubai on an Australian government-assisted departure flight. An assisted departure flight is also due to leave London for Sydney tonight. We have also secured seats for Australians on commercial on commercial flights and flights organised by partner countries. More than 1,400 Australians, previously registered with DFAT, have now left Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories, including more than 500 Australians and their families on 6 assisted departure flights from Tel Aviv. I thank all those who have helped in these efforts. We have been encouraging for some time Australians who want to leave to take the first option available to them. I will be clear, we have seen a lot of spare seats on flights for 2 days in a row. And we have people who have indicated they wish to fly who did not seek to fly. At this stage, we have no further flights from Tel Aviv scheduled, but we will continue to assess need. I want to be clear, my department is communicating directly with registered Australians and we will notify with any updates. I can also advise the Senate that Minister Watt has given approval for the National Emergency Management Agency to activate the AusRecept plan. This will include coordination between federal, state and territory governments to support the reception of people arriving in Australia through assisted departures, helping connect people with homes, families, providing community support and government support where required.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Marielle Smith, first supplementary.
Thank you, Minister, for that update. Reports indicate there continues to be extreme difficulty in helping foreign nationals leave Gaza. Can the minister update the Senate on these efforts?
Minister Wong.
Thank you. I think we all know that there is a very dire humanitarian situation in Gaza, and the situation for Australians and in Gaza and their families at home is deeply distressing. DFAT is in direct contact with now 45 Australians who are seeking to leave Gaza and is keeping them updated. I want to assure everyone that through my own engagement, the engagement of officials, including in the region, we are doing all we can to support the work of the United States, of Egypt and others to make the Rafah border crossing open for humanitarian purposes, including the passage of civilians. Regrettably, efforts to secure passage have not yet been successful despite many attempts. We are already planning accommodation and onward travel for Australians in Gaza if safe passage through Rafah crossing is secured. I welcome Secretary Blinken's update this morning.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Marielle Smith, second supplementary.
Can the minister outline to the Senate how Australia and the Pacific Island family have been supporting each other in helping citizens seeking to leave Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories?
Minister.
Thank you, Senator Smith. If I may just update the Senate first on Secretary Blinken's statement this morning that the US and Israel are developing a plan to enable humanitarian aid to reach civilians in Gaza, including the possibility of creating areas to help keep civilians out of harm's way. We support these efforts. As Senator Smith indicated, we have seen the Pacific family working together in this crisis. Prime Minister Rambuka and I met today, as he is here on this guest of government visit. I thanked him personally for Fiji flying 13 Australians from Israel earlier this week. Can I indicate to the Senate the Australian government has now flown 96 people from Pacific Island nations on assisted departure flights from Tel Aviv overnight. We flew 96 overnight. This brings the total number to 135 citizens from Fiji, Solomon Islands, Vanuatu and Samoa. This is what family can do together.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. Just prior to the election, the now Prime Minister posted a photograph of unleaded petrol advertised in Canberra at $1.75.9 per litre. He commented, "Who remembers when petrol was under $1 a litre?" Minister, since you came to government, can you remember the last time unleaded petrol, on average, cost less than $2 a litre?
Thank you, Senator Colbeck. Minister Wong.
Thank you, Senator, for the question. And I know that I filled up the other day, and I was calculating how much, if I used the car more, I would be No, I'm just waiting for Senator Cash to finish.
Order.
When Senator Cash finishes talking at me, I might get to answer. I was calculating because obviously I'm not in town much, and I've filled up car, which is my mum's actually, which I now have, and I was thinking this reflects what we know, which is people are hurting, and fuel is much higher than we would all like. But as you know, fuel is set by the global markets. Fuel is set by the global markets, and you would know.
Order.
You would know.
Anthony Albanese didn't know that.
Well,
Order.
you would know that petrol prices are set by global markets. What we can do is do something about getting wages moving again. What we can do is deliver cost of living relief through cheaper medicines. What we can do is deliver energy price relief. I'm asked a cost of living question by a party that opposes cheaper medicines, a party that wants higher energy prices, and a party that opposes cheaper childcare. So this is the party that pretends they care about Australians' cost of living.
Minister Wong. Minister Wong, Minister Wong, please resume your seat. Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, President. Point of order on direct relevance. The question was really quite specific about when the last time the cost of fuel on average in Australia was less than $2.
There was a preamble, but I will remind Senator Wong of that part of your question. Minister.
As I said, fuel prices are set by global markets. What we can ensure is that the ACCC monitors petrol, but the reality is the factors driving fuel prices are international benchmark price and the value of the Australian dollar. The last time I looked, it wasn't the Liberal Party's policy to fix the exchange rate. So what we can do is deliver cost of living relief, which those opposite reflexively oppose.
Minister, please resume your seat. Senator Colbeck, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. According to the Australian Automobile Association, the peak motor body representing Australian motoring associations, households now spend more than $415 per week on transport costs, fuel, accounting for almost 16% of their income. When will Australians see fuel prices come down, just as the Prime Minister promised they would if Labor was elected?
Thank you, Senator Colbeck. Minister Wong.
Well, 2 points. The first is, as I said, and you know this, the factors driving fuel prices are international markets and the value of the Australian dollar. And you have no policies whatsoever to deal with either of those issues or to change what the fuel price would be. That's the first point. But the second point is, what are the factors that a government can control? What are the factors the government do? Well, the first is, it can be a government that actually thinks we want to get wages moving, so that people have more capacity to deal with some of these really challenging economic circumstances that the global economy is imposing on this country. So those on us on this side, we actually think getting wages moving again is a good idea. What do you think? You're a low-wage guy. You're a low-wage party. You're the party of lower wages. Deliberate design feature. And Senator Cash, who now is very quiet, who put in a submission saying the importance of lower wages.
Thank you, Minister.
Really?
Thank you, Minister. Minister Wong. Senator Colbeck, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. In another pre-election tweet, 32 days after Russia invaded Ukraine, the Prime Minister stated, when the cost of things like petrol go up, families have to make sacrifices. It can mean movie night is cancelled or kids miss out on important school trips. Given his preoccupation with photo ops, does the Prime Minister realise the sacrifices families are now making as a result of his broken promises on petrol prices, energy bills and wages?
Minister Wong.
I'll take the interjection from my side. Maybe you got the wrong Prime Minister, because the photo-op guy was your guy. The photo-op guy was your guy, actually. Our guy and our people, we want higher wages. You want lower wages. We want energy price relief. You oppose it. We want cheaper medicines.
Order.
You oppose it. We want cheaper childcare. You oppose it. And on and on and on. You're a bunch of frauds when it comes to cost of living. And people know it. People know you're not serious about cost of living. You've always been the party of lower wages, and you always will be.
Order. 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 Interjections are incredibly disorderly. Senator Urquhart.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister for Trade and Tourism, Senator Farrell. I refer to the minister's recent visit to the great state of Tasmania, where he met with representatives of the salmon industry to discuss the industry hitting a milestone in salmon exports. During the visit, he publicly spoke about how these exports support more than 5,000 Tasmanian workers in the industry, with around 85% of these workers being in regional areas. Can the minister update the Senate on these discussions with the salmon industry and the significant levels of exports which are helping to support these critical Tasmanian jobs?
Thank you, Senator Urquhart. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. And can I thank Senator Urquhart for her question. And Senator Urquhart has a very well-deserved reputation as a champion for the over 5,000 Tasmanian workers in the salmon industry. And the salmon industry is a critical employer, creating jobs across Tasmania. And as I know Senator Urquhart knows, she's been actively engaging with the industry to help secure Tasmanian jobs, including a number of recent meetings on the West Coast. I've had a great affinity for the industry ever since I first visited my Uncle Jack, who lived on Cat Island in the middle of Macquarie Harbour. Back then, he used to recount rowing his boat out the harbour to rescue salmon pens that had become loose from their moorings. The industry has come a long way since then. Now the salmon industry contributes $1.36 billion economic activity to Tasmania. I'll repeat that for you, Senator Dunningham, $1.36 billion of economic activity. And during my visit, it was announced that the industry had hit a milestone of $1 billion in cumulative exports over 5 years. I'll repeat that again for you. $1 billion in cumulative exports over 5 years. This is due to the nearly doubling of exports by volume and the tripling of exports in dollar terms, growing from just under $100 million in 18-19 to $300 million last year. This is having a flow-on benefits across the supply chain to companies like Polyform, who I met in Tasmania, come from Adelaide, and make the innovative packaging to export salmon to overseas markets. We want to work with the industry to grow these exports further.
Senator Urquhart, first supplementary.
What great news for such an important industry, which is creating significant economic activity for Tasmania. Exports are clearly an important part of the industry's future. The minister mentioned the tripling of salmon exports over 5 years, with the industry recording nearly $300 million in exports last year. How is the industry taking up opportunities to further expand exports and support even more jobs in Tasmania?
Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Urquhart, for her supplementary question. On my recent visit to Tasmania, I heard how the industry is increasing export and creating more well-paid Tasmanian jobs. Tasmania now rivals major producers like Norway, Chile and New Zealand, having exported 80,000 tonnes of salmon to 21 countries over the past 5 years. And the industry is casting their net wide to land more export opportunities. I know that the major salmon producers in Tasmania are working with Austrade to expand their exports. Austrade has taken salmon exporters to important trade shows, introducing international buyers to salmon exporters, and facilitated inquiries from global customers to export Tasmanian salmon. The salmon industry is expanding to new markets and have welcomed the government's approach to diversifying trade opportunities, including by negotiating free trade agreements.
Senator Urquhart.
Thank you. The salmon industry is also benefiting from the Albanese government's trade diversification agenda. How is the work of our government supporting the industry to grow exports and deliver more of these well-paid jobs for Tasmania?
Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Urquhart for her second supplementary question. The Albanese Labor government's trade diversification strategy is delivering Australian exporters, including the salmon industry. Salmon companies are taking up opportunities under the Albanese government's trade agreements with India, and exports to India commenced this year. Tassal, a fantastic Tasmanian company, Senator Dunn. Tassal, okay, yes, Tassal, I'll agree with that, recently announced it had already exported 30 tonnes of salmon to India and has a goal of reaching 100 tonnes over the next 12 months. And these same companies will be looking to the Albanese government's Southeast Asia economic strategy and seeing even more opportunities to export high-quality salmon to consumers across the region. Labor's trade diversification strategy is growing exports in important sectors, and we want to see more exports because more exports mean more well-paid jobs.
Senator Wong.
Well-paid jobs is a good note to end on. I ask that further questions be placed on notice.